In this video, we'll take a look at creating indices, selecting regions, and defining an orthoplane. After the project finishes processing, you should end up with something like this for the point cloud. And just by taking a look and moving this around, you can see there's definitely some different regions in this area just looking at the vertical development. But let's take a look at the indices and take a look at what we can figure out with that. So we're going to jump over here and go into the index calculator. And like we discussed before, there are many differences here in the type of map we're looking at. So for example, we're looking right now at the near IR map, which we figured out was one that really made those conifers pop. And then we'll also take a look at that red map, which was the opposite. It really made all of the deciduous trees and other areas where there's really not a lot of growth really stand out in there. So with this information, we can create indices. Now, the good news is that the most common indice out there is called NDVI, and it is simply that near-infrared minus the red over the near-infrared plus the red. That's how it gets the indice part of it. And what that is going to do is really going to highlight the different areas that we are looking at for this project. So with the NDVI in here, we can just go ahead and click Generate, and that will begin to set up the map in order to be able to take a look at the reflectance values and create that NDVI that should give us a pretty good look at the difference in the trees. So the NDVI has been generated here, and we can see it's given us some different colors for the different areas that are the deciduous compared to the conifers out here. But just realize there's a lot of different ways that you can change this in order to display it in different ways. For example, you can jump in here and just use one for equal spacing, which will just adjust the map slightly for that. And then we can also go in here for equal areas, and that will change the map as well. You can also define the different numbers of the classes that you might have in here so that things can really pop out of there. You can define a lot more of it. So let's take a look at some of the other indices though. So what we can do is go in here and we can take a look at some of the others. This is one that I already created. This is a near IR and blue one right here. So if we jump into indices, you can see that this is the one right here that that I've gone ahead and calculated. And if you go to create a new one here, you can hit add, and I'm just going to hit edit in this case. And you can see here you can bring the blue bands down and type in what you want. You can do whatever it might be, and you can create all your own type of indices here. So if you wanted for some reason to jump in here and take the square of one of these minus the square of the other one or something like that, you can do all that right here in this and create your own indices in this little formula tab right down here, which is what you will do in order to create that custom indice that's required for the assignment. Now there's an NDRE that you'll also be calculating here, and that's just done the same way. It's not a standard one that is in here, but you'll be able to go in and just again create your own and figure out how to run that through the different indices. And that'll give you a real good idea about how to create your own, because this is a fairly simple project here that we're working with these type of trees. A lot of times you'll be working things that are much more intricate to figure out what's going to make that picture pop and be able to identify the areas that you want to. And that might take some experimentation with those different indices and really figuring out how to make the areas or identify what it is you're looking for through the use of those custom indices that you can use here in Pix4D Mapper. So with that, let's take a look at some different regions. Now, one of the assignment pieces here is to identify the area associated with the conifers compared to the areas associated with the deciduous trees. Now, there's lots of ways that you can go ahead and do that in here, especially using the point cloud. You can draw areas in that. But one of the slick tools here that I think is just a little bit easier way to do that is to use this Regions tab right here. And once you go into Regions, you'll be able to create a new region. I'm just going to leave it unnamed for now. And once you've created that, now you can draw an area. So now I can come in over here and I can go ahead and start drawing an area. You can see my CPU isn't doing real good, but I can draw different areas in here. And if my CPU will keep up with me, I can create different areas here, and then as usual right clicking on the end, it'll close it in. You get the check mark over here. By the way, if you don't get that and you get an X instead, it's probably because when you tried to close it, you accidentally dropped another point down there is usually why it is. So now we have a region there. So we can take a look at the definition of the regions here, and it will tell you the area. Now in this case, it's hectares, which is 0.93 hectares, which is, I think a hectare is about 2.5. I think it's 2.47 acres or somewhere around there. So you can make different areas on here, different regions, and it will tell you the area that's inside there. So for example, I can throw another one in here, and I can add a region. Let's do another one here, and maybe I want to take a look at the area that is in the deciduous kind of area here that we're looking at, and I can run some points down over here. Again, if my cursors will keep up with me, there we go. Come on, Dell. And that will allow us to draw another area in here. I'm just going to make this one a small one since my CPU is obviously having some problems. We got the checks, and now again we can go to regions. We can see that that one's 0.24 hectares. Realize that, by the way, this percentage over here isn't the percentage of the whole thing. It's percentage of the areas that you selected. So it's a little bit confusing there. So it's just better to use the actual area of it. Again, you have to convert it to acres if you want to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more thing we can do here, which is kind of establishing the height of the trees and what is harvestable here. So let's go back to that ray cloud. And there's several ways you can do this. Again, these trees, Douglas firs, are generally starting to be mature at about 120 feet. They probably really like them up to about 150, somewhere around there. But what we can do is take a look at the elevation here. And, if you take a look at this, you'll come up with somewhere between about 218 to about 220 meters is the base altitude for that. And what we can do is build a orthoplane to take a look at that. So I've already built this one in here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And you can read about how to do this. But you create an orthoplane, you can stretch it and move it around and create yourself an orthoplane like this. By the way, I don't like this color, so let's go into display properties. I think it pops better in yellow, so let's go ahead and put yellow on there. And you can see over here that what I've done is I basically took 220 meters, figured out about what the trees would be at for the altitude in order to be about 120 feet tall with that. And then I took basically a clipping distance of 3 meters, or about 10 feet. And what we get is this this depiction here, and it's pretty good because what it's going to do, it's going to show out on the top of here the trees that are above that that elevation. And you can see this right here is the clipping distance. That's about 10 feet. So the top of this is right at about 120 feet, and then the bottom one goes down to about 110 feet. But this gives a real good depiction of what we're talking about here. And you can see that there's probably only about, of all the trees out here, maybe 10%, probably a little less than 10% of those trees are actually over that 120 feet. So in this case, this is probably not an area they're going to want to harvest for a few more years, just because the trees aren't mature enough in that area. So the orthoplane is a great way to do that. You can also do it if you come over and do an area with the point cloud. It works for that. The problem with that is that you can't just define arbitrary places. Everything has to be attached to one of the points in the point cloud. So that's a great way to be able to, again, give a visual depiction to your customer that this is the area that that can be harvested, or in this case should be harvested yet, because the trees just aren't tall enough and mature enough. So that gives you a few examples of how to set up those indices, how to create the different regions to define the areas, and also a way to take a look at the trees and whether or not some are mature or not. Keep in mind, though, this last orthoplane here, this only works when you have an altitude that is basically even for the bottom of it. It gets a little trickier when you're doing it on hills and things like that, but it can still be done with methods like this. Hope that helped.